Please come to order. It's 2:30 p.m. I'd like to welcome Committee Vice Chair Cordero and Committee Member Okimoto. Committee members Kiaina and Tupola are excused from the meeting. Before we start our meeting, I have some procedural announcements to make. Pursuant to Section 92-3.7 Hawaii Revised Statutes, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda when the item is taken up in the following order: in-person testimony in the council chamber, then remote testimony. Before testifying, each person shall state their name. Each speaker may not have anyone else read their statement and is limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. For remote testifiers, when your name is called, please monitor your screen and activate your audio feed when prompted. For those who are joining us by telephone only, I will identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your number is called, please press *6 to unmute yourself when prompted. Some friendly reminders and tips: please video conference from a quiet location if possible. If you are also watching the proceedings on Olelo, please mute your television at the time you are called to testify. When the timer on screen reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. All registered testifiers will be called upon first. Then I will give persons who have not registered an opportunity to speak following the oral testimonies of the registered speakers. Please utilize the raise hand feature in Zoom to be called upon. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at remote meetings to be conducted by roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, I will first call for objections, and if any, I will call for a roll call vote. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones for the duration of this meeting, and I'd like to welcome Council Vice Chair and member of the Transportation Committee, Kiaina, to the meeting. And we'll begin with agenda item number 1, which is Bill 20 of 2023, which addresses parking in the City and County of Honolulu, including the city's restricted parking zone program. Members, we do have a posted proposed CD1, and for your information, a summary of the amendments is listed on the agenda addendum. We have from the administration, Director Morton from the Department of Transportation Services.
Aloha, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Roger Morton. I'm Director of Transportation Services. We strongly support Bill 20, something that I think we've all both been working for a couple of years, really. This is residential restricted parking zones. We saw the posted CD1 late last week. We have done a side-by-side review of the differences. We still have some issues that we would like to work out between our staff and your staff. But in general, we support the bill enthusiastically.
Thank you, members. Any questions for the director? Okay, seeing none, Director, I just want to thank you and your staff for proposing this. I think the residents in the existing RPZ zones will be very happy to have a structure, and anyone seeking to implement an RPZ in their neighborhoods will also be grateful to have a structure and a process they can follow once this bill gets to the end of its process.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now proceed with in-person testimony on this matter. Clerks, I see we have Kathleen Rooney who is registered. After Kathleen, clerks, are there any other registered in-person testifiers?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we'll proceed. Ms. Rooney from Ulupono Initiative.
Thank you so much. My name is Kathleen Rooney from Ulupono Initiative. I'm the Director of Transportation Policy and Programs, and we just wanted to provide in-person support for this measure. We're really excited to see a program and a framework go in place. Sometimes parking is a little less than the most exciting topic, but this really takes a step forward in moving a lot of our community plans forward and, really working towards the kind of transportation system and communities that we hope to have in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions for Ms. Rooney? Okay. Seeing none, is there anyone else in the council chamber who would like to testify? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed with a remote testimony. I understand we have Angela Melody Young.
Hello, Aloha, City Council, Chair, Vice Chair, and the committee, Angela Melody Young, testifying on behalf of CARES. And we are just testifying to provide comments about the restrictive parking zones, specifically for disabilities as it relates to the ADA Federal Act, that if there is going to be restricted parking zones, that, by the federal law, the federal act, there still needs to be provisions for disabled people. And so, if people could kind of just consider this when they implement the bill, because disabled people are very severely disadvantaged because of medical conditions. People can't be making it harder for disabled people to access parking or to access equity within the community. So I just really hope that for those who aren't aware of the hard time disabled people have, that they really consider this and the implications of it if people do make it harder for disabled people. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And members, any questions for Ms. Young? For the viewers, Bill 20, the original bill, as well as the CD1, both provide that anyone with a disability placard will be exempt from the program and may be able to park in a restricted parking zone with a disability placard. Clerks, is there anyone else standing by remotely to testify?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, members, we are in discussion. Members, any discussion on this bill? Okay, there being none. There being none, the chair recommends that Bill 20 of 2023 be amended to the posted CD1. Any discussion, objections, or reservations to that recommendation? Okay, hearing none, Bill 20 of 2023 is amended to the CD1. Chair then recommends that Bill 20 of 2023 CD1 be reported out for passage on second reading and scheduling of a public hearing. Any discussion on that recommendation? Any objections or reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Thank you, and we will be continuing to work on this, and we do anticipate having a CD2 at a future Transportation Committee meeting. Agenda item number 2 is Resolution 23-38. This approves the Department of Transportation Services Agency Rail Safety Plan for rail operations required by 49 CFR Part 673 and 49 CFR Part 674 and Hawaii State Department of Transportation Program Standards and Procedures. We have with us Director Morton. If you'd like to introduce this to all of us.
Thank you, Chair. This safety plan is a requirement of federal law. We actually had this plan approved earlier, September 2nd, 2020. This is a revision of that plan, updated, some language changes to conform with the federal notice and requirement. I do have staff here if there are technical questions that we're not able to answer, but we would beg the council's approval of the resolution.
Okay, thank you. We'll get back to, I think we'll get back to some of the specific questions in discussion, but thank you for that introduction and that overview. Is there anyone in the chambers who would like to testify on this matter? Okay, seeing none, is there anyone standing by remotely to testify? Okay, I see we have Angela Melody Young. Please proceed.
Yeah, aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the committee, Angela Melody Young, testifying in strong support. So, for the HART operations, I think they should schedule the safety, it's the safety assessment before HART starts operating in the summer. But I mean, they've already been conducting the HART operations. I don't know if that's the same thing that we're talking about here in the resolution. But yeah, the safety parameters should kind of be set before people start, going on hard. So thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Yeah, thank you. Members, any questions for the testifier? All right. Seeing none, clerks, is there anyone else standing by remotely to testify?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Members, we are in discussion on this, and I wanted to ask if members have any questions that they wanted to ask about the safety plan. If not, I have a few, and maybe we can get director or somebody who's been working on the plan to talk about this. It's been in the news that this safety plan envisions rail only being operational until 7 p.m. During the initial phase of operations. And maybe you can talk a little bit about how these operating hours were arrived at and negotiated with. So that's the first part of the question. And then the second part is if we have any ability to amend these hours if it's shown that there's a need to do so, if there's overwhelming demand or perhaps underwhelming demand at certain times.
Certainly, I can attempt to answer that. These decisions on hours were determined probably 2-3 years ago when the contract with the lead operator, Katachi, was negotiated. I think that the rationale was that the system that we're going to open provides only a very limited increase in mobility for the island. It goes from East Kapolei to Stadium, not really the most attractive pairs. It is an interim operation while we extend the system. So based on our analysis of bus ridership in particular, we determined that most of our bus ridership drops off precipitously after 7 p.m. And that was the basic reason for doing that. It's a question of balancing the cost of operating not only the rail system, but all of the associated bus service that accompanies the rail system, so that we want to have an integrated system where people can use both the bus and the rail. And so we do provide parallel bus service throughout the entire day, same as we do right now. So we're not limiting the ability of people to travel back to primarily to the west side, to Eva and to further west. But we made the decision 3 years ago that this made sense. Now, going into the next interim operations, we then have service that operates much later than that. And that's sort of a reflection that as we pick up Airport and Middle Street, the actual amount of additional mobility that we're providing to the community increases a lot. And of course, as we get to downtown, that's when the real value of rail and the real increase in mobility will occur. So those were our reasons for, choosing the hours that we did and open. The second part of the question was, is there a mechanism to increase hours if it was determined that this was a desirable thing to do? And the answer is yes, there is. There is a provision in the contract for incremental increases in service if such a decision were to be made. But those, again, are not without fiscal consequences.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge the presence of Committee Member Tupola, so welcome. And then we have a question from Member Kiaina.
Thank you. With regard to the plan, how do you take into account ADA compliance? And also, I don't know if it's connected to this, but I have some constituents who have been concerned with regard to when they go to the rail, when they have the kiosks, that it's also ADA compliant because, DC has a long, has had theirs for a long time, but sometimes it's very challenging for the disabled to be able to use the kiosk. So I just want to make sure in the planning purposes, first of all, number one, for your overall plan, that you take into account ADA compliance. And then second, I guess I'm curious, I just want to make sure the kiosks are up and running to make sure that we take care of them.
Okay, let me go to the second one first. There is ADA regulations that define what is required in order for a TVM to be acceptable under the ADA, and the system has been designed and built to meet those standards. Now, as to the broader question of the ADA access to the entire system, again, this is a new system. It will incorporate all ADA rules. There are, as there is on a bus, there's an accessible bus that has a ramp that people can get on. There are navigational things on buses, announcements of what route is coming for those that have vision problems. There are signage within the buses that show where the next stops are, and it's similar in rail too. The rail has every station has an elevator that will be accessible to people that use a mobility device. The main difference, and this is one that I hear a lot of, is that our folks are used to being strapped down in a bus or a handy van so that the mobility device is fixed and can't careen out of control. But that's really a requirement because the bus is subject to crash stops, just very quick stops if someone pulls in front. And if a wheelchair or mobility device is not strapped down, that could be catastrophic for the people and for the people in the chair and also for the people in the bus. So that's why the rule for buses, because they're not a planned start and stop, but they're subject to to whatever happens in traffic. On a rail system like this, the acceleration and deceleration is carefully controlled and is not subject to emergency stops and the like. And so throughout the country, it is normal for wheelchairs to come in and set their brakes so they don't roll, but not require someone to come in and put a restraining strap around the device. There are spaces in all the trains that are engineered for people to stow their wheelchairs. And we have, there'll be devices on board to help people navigate which stop is coming up and other things that are important to folks with disability. We are planning to outreach to our disability community in a number of ways. First and foremost, right now, we are putting together a list of interested organizations that can come and first of all be indoctrinated with a slideshow that we'll go through. But we're working toward also trying to find a mechanism that we can take folks down to actually see the stations, use the elevators, see the trains, and actually ultimately to ride in the train. So we're committed to working with all the disabled organizations, be they state or social service agencies, or be they simply customers that have advocacy groups that want to learn that. So a very important topic for us, and we're going to do it right.
Thank you so much for that very, thorough answer. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Cordero.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Director Morton. Thank you for being here.
Aloha.
And for the plan. Of course, we see that the plan has definitely expanded since 2020 or 2021, I believe, or 2020, I should say. And my question is relating to the operating hours and how will DTS be providing that information or disseminating that information? Bless you.
Well, we're doing it in a number of ways. We're for example, on Thursday, we'll be doing a ride share at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. We've designed brochures that are specific to Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, as we did for the West Side, as we're doing for every community. We're making unique brochures that are specific to those areas. We are planning on an extensive public outreach, both by attending meetings and also by working with our local media to get that information out. And you'll be seeing more and more of that as we get closer and closer to the date that we're planning to go to some of the hard to serve communities. We've committed to go to ethnic radio stations and have talk story on the radio station about rail. And we're happy to take any, if anybody has a suggestion on a demographic that we might be missing, we're really out to try to make sure that we don't miss people.
Thank you. My next question is in relation to what's in the plan relating to the scope of transit services. It relates to a few things here where we talk about, of course, we know that there will be 2 operating segments that's mentioned in this plan. And then, so it's first and second operating segments. But I do want to draw attention to where it mentions base hours, peak hours, late hours. Of course, it's easy to understand for us who has the opportunity to review it over and over again. But then also we have operating periods, peak base periods, and also just what is the scope of what is considered the base? Is that just the station itself? Does that include the parking lot? Does this include what we're used to, right? With like a TOD area, is that considered the base? And then also, I guess the difference is, let's say I'm at Kalawao Station or at Halava Station. I want to know, I'm going to be here, and this is how I'm going to feel protected at this station at this point of time right before 4 a.m. when I get to the station at 4 a.m.
That's a couple of questions, but let me try those ones anyway. First of all, the term base really in this context, it's meant to be it's a transit terminology. Usually. And you can break it down, but normally transit service is broken down into 4 different time periods: the AM peak period, the base period between the AM and the PM peak period, and the night period. Some people will break it down further, very early. It depends upon how complex, but basically that. Now, in the rail environment, on the first segment, we're going to be running our system every 10 minutes. So that will be fairly easy to communicate. And further, it means that no matter what time you arrive at a station, the longest you're going to have to wait is 10 minutes if you saw that train pulling out of the station as you were reaching the top of the platform. So that'll be pretty easy to communicate. When we open interim area 2 and 3, and we go later than that, then our later night services will revert to a 15-minute schedule rather than a 10-minute schedule. So our thinking at this point is that up until 7 p.m. or so, that we're going to run it every 10 minutes in the second segment. And then in the third segment, our peak periods will go down to as close as every 6 minutes. So that's the terminology there. You asked about how do you feel safe in the system at 4 in the morning, or I guess at 9 o'clock at night, or any time really. And the answer is that we do have quite a well thought out security plan for operating rail. We have 3 tiers of security that we talk about. The first tier being tier 1, which is a combination of station agents and roving Aloha ambassadors that will be employed by our partner Hitachi. And they will be in the stations and on the trains, not necessarily every train, but I think our basic guideline is at least every second train and maybe a little bit more when we first start up. That's tier 1. And these are really customer service folks, but they walk around the trains. They have a means to communicate with the central control area. And they're there just to keep an eye on what's going on. Tier 2 would be a contracted security force that DTS has contracted, and they will be there to provide a security presence. They'll be circulating as well in the parking lots, in the park and rides, in the stations, and on the trains. A third tier would be that if there is an incident going on requiring law enforcement, that'll be the job of HPD. HPD will be called, and based on my years of experience with the bus system, they have been just incredible partners for the last few decades. In addition to that, there are some other features that that I should talk about. One would be that there are intercom availabilities in every car, so that you can speak to someone at central control. There's emergency alarms in every car that you can activate. There are cameras in every car. There are multiple cameras in every car. There's more than 1,500 cameras in the system altogether. And these cameras are all centered in our rail operating center. They will be manned they'll be manned whenever the system is operating by an attendant. The system is quite sophisticated. It has artificial intelligence built into it. It can recognize when there is something unusual going on, and can alert the operator of the system and zero in on anything that's unusual. So and finally, I know I've heard from many people that say, well, the bus has a bus operator. This train doesn't have a train operator. And while that's true, my experience with other transit systems that have train operators is they're usually at the front of the train. They're usually in a special compartment that's closed off from the rest of the car, and their job is really to operate the train. They can be helpful if there's a situation going on, but yeah, I would much rather have the resources put to automating that train operation and having that person, that ambassador, circulate in the train as a customer service person.
Thank you. Thank you for your responses. I guess my main question regarding the safety aspect is the scope of where the base is located, of where, and I think you touched up on that for certain, like how some will be, if there is a park and ride, it will include the park and ride, for example. So you did include that in your comprehensive response. I also wanted to make that point as to the explanation of the different time periods, whether it be early or morning or AM, base, peak, evening, late hours, just so that we will be able to know how to also present that to our communities. And of course, that's something that the more we talk about it, and I'm grateful that the committee chair is going to be talking about operations for the next few months before it opens. But that's why it's important, because we aren't used to these different peak, or I guess periods or hours that we're talking about here. My next question is relating to the AEDs. I know that we had two resolutions or bills, I believe, that we did go through the last 2 years. And I know that those were related to the AEDs on the trains, but it's good to see that also that the AEDs are going to be at the entrances. Did you see that you exceeded the amount of AEDs needed, or is this all required federally, the amount that we have right now?
We will be the first rail system of this type to have AEDs on the trains. Commuter trains often have AEDs. Commuter trains also have conductors, and so those AEDs go along with a trained AED operator. These are more like the AEDs that we have at the airport, where a civilian, if you will, can operate the AEDs. We have AEDs both in the stations, and we have one in the train. And if you need more information, I can have Patrick come up and explain how far along we are on that right now.
Okay. That's okay. I do have another question because I know that you have 3 different tiers of safety, and I know that a concern of safety is when we're tending either cash or dealing with our credit cards, and that's at the ground level at our vending machines or ticket vending machines. I'm not trying to call it. So how will we ensure safety there for when our neighbors are tending to the ticket machines?
Well, there's a couple of issues there. One is the cybersecurity issue, because if you and our systems are certified by an outside entity to be compliant with all cybersecurity issues. The key to riding transit in general, and especially on rail, is the holo card. And we encourage all of our residents to get a holo card. We encourage them to not necessarily, I mean, they can go to a ticket vending machine and put in money and then add it to a card like you do in Washington or San Francisco. But we certainly encourage people to use other means to top off their card. The easiest one is online. Some people don't like to do online, so that's that. We can also go to any of 100 merchants, such as 7-Eleven, Foodland, Times Supermarket, Satellite City Halls, the Bus Pass office, and they can just go to those offices and add value to their card. You can also call our call center. We have a call center that you can call and give a payment card, and they'll add it to your card. Or you can go to a TVM. TVMs are our most costly form of taking money. They break a lot. They have all the cash has got to be collected and counted. So personally, I like to steer people to other options rather than the TVMs. I'll make a plug though for the holo card here that under our holo card system, we have this option that we call best fare, and best fare means you don't have to buy a pass for $80 up front. You can just simply use cash. It's $3 a trip, and that includes a free transfer. And if you rode the rail and the bus system 13 times for 13 round trips, that would come to $78. The next trip would cost you $2, and it would be free for the remainder of the calendar month. If you were a youth, same thing, only it would cap off at 40. And so there's a lot of options that people have, and we want to get them to learn how to use these. Capped fares, which is what I just talked about, is particularly friendly to people, that are disproportionately low income, that may not have $80 at one time to buy a pass. And so right now, or what historically has happened, has been a lot of folks from that are low income will pay the cash fare and will actually pay more than they have to just because they don't have the money up front. And so now with our holo card, we have a way for everybody to get an equitable fare.
Okay, thank you. My one last question for this line of questioning is relating to the annual reviews and the annual, discussions to address the policies and also the plan. I was wondering, in the meantime, as we work up to the annual review and annual certifications, is there going to be a timeline so that the system, that the policies, that the safety plan is, continuously looked at for all the stations? Because I'm sure that having to look at all the safety measures at the first segment's stations can't be done all in one day, right? Or can't be done all in 1 week for an annual review and annual certification, right? For the different staff and whatnot. So I was wondering if there's going to be like a tiered off plan that will help us get to the final annual review point.
Well, a lot of the annual review will be compliance review to make sure that we have a plan and that we're actually following it. And we do have staff that that's one of their jobs is to do that. Another, the safety plan is an organic plan. It's a living plan. And one of the features that we're building into the plan is assurances that employees of the system or even the public who have a concern can make their concern known without fear of retribution or those. And that's an ironclad guarantee that we have that if one of our employees sees something that they don't think is safe, they have the right and the responsibility to come forward and share that in a way with built-in control, so that operating managers can't ding them for slowing down the system or whatever the situation is. So that's part of the safety plan, and it's a very important part. We're working with our employee unions when we do that, and that's what we're trying to build into our plan.
Thank you, and thank you for all the work, and thank you, Chair, for allowing me the time.
Thank you. Member Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director Morton. My question is similar to, I think, what Councilmember Cordero asked in the beginning. I just had a simple question about the hours of operation. So I saw in phase 1 you had, I think it was 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's from Kapolei to Aloha Stadium, and then phase 2 you increased the hours. I guess my concern is 7 p.m. seems fairly early to me when I think about, I know my district is a little bit detached from the Kapolei area, but when I think about the people that ride the bus and they're coming back from town, what if, like today, there's a bad traffic day, it seems like you have a very efficient schedule, which is great, but to me, 7 p.m. is a little early. I worry that there'll be people of the community who want to catch the train back home, but they won't be able to get back in time.
I think even in the first section, I hear what you're saying, but let me offer that at 7 p.m. too, we have pretty much gone past the crush hours. And so your bus ride is not likely to be held up in heavy traffic. So that's one thing. Ultimately, it's a judgment call as to what our hours should be. And it's really, as I say, it's a balancing of cost effectiveness. If we ran trains after 7 p.m. and they were virtually empty, it would be a black eye for DTS and for the city. So in our analysis, there will be, in this first section particularly, that just goes from East Kapolei to Stadium, we're not expecting hordes of people. We're going to be doing the best we can to get as many as we can, but we're only expecting about 10% of what we ultimately would project when we're into town. And so that's sort of been an issue too, is that we want to balance just both the cost effectiveness and we don't want to look like that we are running empty trains.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So in the event, let's say you do have more ridership, and are you willing to look at it and adjust it? Or is this is it? And also, so in the second phase, you do have it going to 9 p.m. Is that only for this section from Aloha Stadium to the Middle Street?
No, that's the entire section. Going to, at that point, Middle Street. So
I guess that's my little confusion, because you're saying right now we are not going to have the train empty right now when it goes from East Kapolei to Aloha Stadium. But when you open up from Aloha Stadium to Middle Street, you're going to then operate to 9 p.m. The entire phase 1 and 2, or this is just phase 2?
It will be the entire system.
the entire system.
Right.
So at that point, you're having it go later.
Yes.
And you may have the empty train, which you're talking about, would not be sufficient in the first phase.
Well, we picked up the airport and a few other really important traffic generators in the second phase. And Middle Street, which is our gateway to Kalihi. And so at that point, although we're not anywhere near getting the mobility that we'll have when we get to downtown, we more than double the additional mobility to the island by the time we get to Middle Street.
Okay, so my last question is, so your system dealing with the buses then will then compensate for anyone who can no longer, if the train ends at 7, the bus will have them be able to provide service to them to get all the way home to the west side then?
Yeah, we have a line, Route 40, that pretty much parallels the system, and we will continue to operate that line during interim 1, during interim 2, and our plans are even during interim when we have the final system, and that's because the stations are on average about a mile apart. And so you still need some local circulation, even from a station to half mile further up where you might want to be going. So we're not planning to cut that back at all.
Okay, and I want to put a plug, so at some point it will have to, because we don't have the Pearl Highlands station yet. There's buses that will be able to get them off of the train and take them to my and Councilmember Matt Wyer's district as well.
Yeah, and I hope that we can hold that one to the informational briefing here when the Hart folks come up.
Okay, thank you, Director Morton. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Member Tupola, any questions?
Are we on resolution, the first item?
This is on the rail safety plan.
Oh, yeah. Could I ask a question? Thank you. Director, I'm not going to go through all of it, but I've just been going through all of like some grammatical formatting and other suggestions on some of the written documents. But is it okay if I just email it over to you?
Yes, absolutely.
Because you said it's a living document, right?
It's a living document, but the rules of the Federal Transit Administration do require the policymaking board to approve it.
Oh, okay, because I saw at the bottom of the page, it's going to show if there's any edits that have been made. So I'm guessing if there is any approvals or changes, then it's going to reflect down here and we can see the changes. But nothing big. I think just like it's a very long document. There's just some suggestions I had on trying to make it easier to understand. But of course, going through the policy board. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you. Vice Chair Cordero.
Thank you. And I want to thank Councilmember Tupola for that, because there were some parts, technical amendments that may be needed, because, like, for example, on page 28, it just mentions how many traction power substations and gap breaker stations there are, but it doesn't complete the sentence. Once again, it's page 28 under figure 3.1 and the route map. Of course, beyond not knowing what traction power substations and gap breaker stations are, of course, wondering if there's any further types of things or technology that's related to both that we may need to add to finish the thought here.
I will add, I know my staff's taking notes behind me, I'm sure, on that. These are accessory items that are related to power supply, both the gaps and the traction stations. They're basically big transformer stations. They're walled off. They're not accessible by the public, but they support the train's operation. But I will ask my staff to look at that grammar.
Thank you very much. My last question for this period of questioning is related to the transfer, or when riders are going from rail to the bus or bus to the rail, when there is, I know it could be just like, hey, it's in the park and ride, or it's at the bus stop at the park and ride. So it's technically in the station's purview and security. But let's say there's an occurrence on the bus or outside of the bus. Has there been run-throughs through those types of security instances?
Yes, I guess that's the short answer. Would be that there can never be enough, but there have been attempts to try to anticipate all the different things. I know that the bus company has been recently looking at the rail stations, looking at access, and we'll continue to do that for the next few months.
Okay, so the access is permeable for both bus operators and train operators, or station operators, excuse me.
I think I understand you, and the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to note that during one of the pop-ups that we had, they just wanted to ensure, and I did talk about the different levels, even from the plan before, the different levels of safety. So would that approach be 1, 2, or 3 tier?
It would be 1 or 2.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Members, any other questions? If not, Director, I do want to get into something technical in the plan. The plan does identify and describe the hazard management process, and I wanted to ask if there are any open hazards that have not been fully resolved at this point. You know, we're looking at coming up on operations in a matter of months, and we want to make sure that each of these hazards has been mitigated. And so I wanted to ask if we could just briefly touch upon those so we have confidence that the system will, operate without any hazards or problems or anything that would undermine public confidence.
Yeah, let me introduce my staff member, Patrick Prosher, who is the director of Rapid Transit and has had a major stake in putting this plan together to answer that question.
Good afternoon, Patrick Preuser, Director of Rapid Transit. The short answer to that question is yes, and it's an ongoing process. So not only before we go into passenger service will we have open hazards, but we will also have open hazards while we're in passenger service on into the rest of the operating segments. So this is something that we work closely with. If you're not aware, the Hawaii Department of Transportation is the state safety oversight. They're the liaison between Hawaii and the Federal Transit Administration. We have basically a committee and working group governance and structure, and we meet regularly across a number of different committees and working groups. And all of the individuals involved in that are involved in this process that we're talking about. What hazards have been identified, what proposed mitigations, what mitigations are being proposed, and then we're monitoring those to determine if those mitigations are actually having the desired effect. And if so, we can move to closure. If not, we need to propose new mitigations so that those get to an acceptable level. Some examples of hazards that are reported, just like what you come across in your daily life, day-to-day business. Sometimes there's infestations with bees, birds. Sometimes there's tripping hazards. There could be equipment installed that for one reason or another, designs didn't take into consideration the work that needs to be performed in that area. So there needs to be a revision or a modification. But those are all examples of how we approach risk management and get to an acceptable level when it comes to hazards.
And then another just sort of technical question. I understand that if an incident or an accident were to occur, there's a reporting requirement to the FTA and to the NTSB. Can you talk about what DTS's standards are in terms of reporting these and how they match up with the federal expectations for reporting any sort of incident?
Yeah, so there's both national, state, and then our reporting threshold. So just from a general accident incident perspective, we really are governed by the state safety oversight program that I mentioned earlier. And we've established through this plan and other plans, procedures, and work instructions, a tighter time frame. So our requirements are a bit more stringent, about 50%. So to give you an example, there's about 7 categories of accidents that require certain notification to the Hawaii Department of Transportation. And I'll just briefly mention what what our requirements are, but just keep in mind that the actual requirement is double that. So if we do have an accident that falls in one of those categories, we report that within 1 hour. Then there's a follow-up report at 24 hours, and then there's a 21-day report. And then that continues to get monitored until all of the details associated with that event are closed out. So again, the actual requirement is 2 hours, 48 hours, and 30 days. So we're more stringent than that.
That's good to hear. I think that, we want to be as open and transparent as possible and, get bad information or bad news reported very quickly so we can correct it. It's something that has sort of come up in the questions here. It is a living document, and so we are expected to approve this plan from time to time. Is that an annual thing, or is it as needed? What opportunities do we have as a council to continually review this?
Yeah, so whenever there's a material change to the plan, it'll be brought forward to City Council. As Director Morton mentioned earlier, it is a living document. As we get more information, we experience things, there will be updates from time to time and adjustments made to the plan. But you should expect anytime there's a material change to the plan that it will come forward to this committee for approval.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other question? Any other questions?
Thank you. Mr. Priester, I think you actually answered my question, because I was going to say, okay, so, if there are amendments, then should we be requesting the chair to defer this or make amendments already by the time we have our council meeting? But as you mentioned, that the more amendments are made, then it will come before our committee.
Yeah, that's correct. And one thing that I would add is, again, the Hawaii Department of Transportation State Safety Oversight is also involved in this process. So they've reviewed the plan. We have received conditional approval that came forward on March 14th of this year. And once we get the resolution approved by the council, we'll get full approval as well. So just so that everybody's aware, there are other bodies involved in the approval process as well.
Thank you. And again, these are material changes need to come before us. And so items like those that you've identified, Floor Leader Cordero or Councilmember Tupola, things that are sort of grammatical or typographical, I think we can correct those without having another full hearing. But if there is something material, we certainly will. All right. Any other discussion or questions, members? Okay. There being none, the chair recommends that Resolution 23-38 be reported out for adoption. Any objections? Any reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 3 on the agenda. Item number 3 is Resolution 23-42, which requests the Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation and the City Administration to prepare a study evaluating parking and other transportation options for the Waiawa or Pearl Highlands Rail Station. We have with us John Nouchi, Deputy Director of the Department of Transportation Services. So, Deputy Director, if you could introduce this and give us an overview.
Aloha, good afternoon. Chair and Committee, John Nouchi, Deputy Director, Department of Transportation Services. This request, we thank you for providing this reso, and we strongly support this reso. Our action item here is that through our department, sister department of land management, we have identified the Pearl Highlands, the Waiawa Pearl Highlands Station as a good opportunity to look at what other amenities we could do outside of the initially planned ramps, park and ride, transit center, guideway, and stations. What we'd like to analyze is the housing and commercial potential that can be merged with this property. As you know, affordable housing is one of the priorities of this administration, and I know of the council. And anytime we have the ability to do true TOD, transit-oriented development, it would be a great opportunity to co-locate a lot of housing, some very useful commercial activities, and other opportunities to connect, actually looking future forward. We have other communities that will touch this station in the future, such as Kamehameha School's Waiawa Mauka, and understanding that this station is located in somewhat of a pedestrian inconvenient location, being surrounded by 4 major highways. What we want to do is figure out the best way to establish a solid, dense housing base, provide the parking that in the interim will serve for park and ride, and also give everyone who lives there and everyone in the community further retail and commercial opportunities to actually further catalyze any TOD opportunity. So for that long answer, all I wanted to say is that the work is underway. We have a contractor on board who is going to do some initial infrastructure planning and massing studies, such that we can figure out how much infrastructure is available there, and even the constructability of the site and other issues that might come up. So this was to be a first step towards us doing a true TOD in that area. So we do thank the introducers of this. We have Councilmember Talba and Councilmember Wire, just to reassure this committee and the council that it is work that we have started and will produce a report on.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions to Deputy Director Noguchi? I also want to acknowledge the presence of Councilmember Talba. Welcome. Any questions? Oh, Member Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. Aloha, Director Noichi. I had a question. So from my understanding, the parking lot wasn't finished, right, Director Kahikini, because we found that the ground underneath it wasn't stable enough. That's what I was understanding. Is that, and I want to just kind of, from what you shared earlier, how are we going to now build housing or other things? I want to make use of the structure. I see it. I've said that before on my rides home. But
Yes,
did I understand that correctly? The ground, we found that it wasn't stable enough. That's why we couldn't finish the parking structure.
For the record, Lori Kahikina, CEO and Executive Director of HART. So yes, oh, thank you. Do you want this? Yeah. I was hoping they wouldn't question me as long. Okay. Yes, Council Member. So what I have testified before is that the soft substrate underneath was making the parking structure so expensive, and so we need to find a better alternative. But I understand the purpose of the resolution. So I hear what you're saying. So if you put housing over, it's going to make it even heavier. So I think that's what DTS is saying to. We have a consultant to try and take a look at that.
Okay, so the goal is, that's the goal though, to end up turning it into housing? Which I'm not against any of it. I just don't want to spend more money and then find out that we can't do anything.
Fair enough. So I think we would have to work HART and DTS. What I've always said publicly is we have to find a solution as far as the parking garage. So that's on HART. We're charged with finding a solution. And what I've said before is looking at LCC, looking at Alexander and Baldwin, even looking at a spur to go up to Waipio. But we have talked recently with a vendor on a robotic parking garage, and I'm hesitant on robotics because there's a lot of moving parts. But that was something that we should look into because it's much lighter. It's probably half the weight of a normal conventional parking structure. So we do have to look at all different alternatives, and that's what Deputy Director Noji is talking about.
Thank you, Director Kahikini.
You're welcome.
Kahikina. And I just want to put a plug. I appreciate my colleagues who have put this resolution, but I know in my community, this was from the beginning. In Mililani,
Yes.
they wanted it because it connected it to our community.
Absolutely.
And in Pearl City, this is something important because it's in that part of the district.
Absolutely.
So I just want to make sure that we're really fiscally prudent and we think things through. What I don't want is to have another project that's presented to us and then the neighborhood is told we
enough.
can't complete it again. I don't know if the community could stomach that. So
Correct.
hopefully
Correct.
we can communicate and be thorough.
Yes.
This is in the heart of center of my actual district. So thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
You want to add something?
Thank you. Members, any other questions for Director Kahikina, so that way she doesn't have to keep going back and forth from the gallery? Okay, members, any other questions for Deputy Director Nucci?
Actually, if I may, I wanted to add on a little bit to Executive Director Kahikina's statement. In this case, what was proposed for Pearl Highlands was just a parking lot. Now, if we're just proposing parking, we're proposing something that will only be useful when rail is running. And we thought that it made sense that if the parking usage can be shared with any residential or any other commercial activities that happen there, then you have more revenue generating capability, thus justifying the cost of constructing those units. So we don't, of course, doing more on that site would be more expensive than just doing the parking, but we want to make sure that most of all, that there is a station here, there is a potential neighborhood we could build here. We just want to make sure that we can use that land to its highest and greatest use. And I kind of just wanted to put that forward, but we will work with you because we understand this is square in one of the most sensitive areas of your district. And so, of course, we would like to keep you updated on that.
Thank you. And Chair, if I could just, so Director Noguchi, if you could, I would love to hear when you do the study, when the cost could be recouped at some point. I understand that to build, we're going to have to, it will cost money, but at some point we have to know when we will recover that cost with these revenue generating projects that you will be doing. And I would love to see it. Again, it's right in that center. And I'm going to put a plug in. I think DTS also needs to look at that part of the street is a traffic nightmare. And the thought of having homes there, which I support, will only make it worse than it already is. And it's pretty bad right now. So there's a lot that has to be considered as you're developing in this one spot of that district. It's really bad right there.
I 100% agree with you. That's what happens when, as I said earlier, you have a station that's smack dab in the middle of 4 major highways. That was probably selected due to the fact that there was available space there. But what we would like to do holistically is look at the whole community. DTS is putting in for grants to fund a potential pedestrian bridge that connects the station directly to the Pearl Highlands Center. Any future development in Waiava Mauka on the other end, west of the station, probably would require the same types of treatment. I am usually not a fan of second-level pedestrian overpasses, but in this case, it would make sense if we provide a quality, attractive neighborhood, then we have a flow between Pearl City, Pearl Highlands, our station, and the neighboring communities, which actually kind of start to connect it in a pedestrian-focused way to Waipahu. So we're creating places here, and if we can do that and lasso in all the assets and build a better neighborhood, I think that's our goal here. So in terms of cost recovery, 100% agree with you. It will be, if you look at just building parking, it's almost impossible. You would never recover the cost just based on parking. That's why we want to look at other opportunities to be bundled with that and co-located with that.
Mahalo. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, just one last item. I know that the resolution calls for a study evaluating parking and other transportation options. I know you touched upon this at the beginning, but I want to reiterate, this doesn't preclude the administration from studying housing and retail and a number of other things and providing that to us.
Oh, yes. I think conveniently, we've kind of embarked on the same journey to talk about this at the same time as the reso. So we're not duplicating any work. It's actually the request comes at a very timely time for us. For that, we thank you.
Thank you. All right. We'll now proceed with in-person testimony. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers? Oh, we have one. All right, we have one. Sorry, we have 1 minute, and if you could come up to the microphone. Sorry, you need to come up to the microphone. Pardon me, sir. Sir. Pardon me. Sorry, we're okay. Thank you. All right, that was not germane to this agenda item. So is there anyone else that wants to testify on the study for parking and transportation options? Okay, seeing none in the chamber. I see we have Angela Melody Young remotely, if you'd like to testify. Please unmute yourself and proceed.
Oh, wow. I didn't know I could unmute myself. I usually don't have the authority to do that. Angela Melody Young testifying on behalf of Kapalama Neighborhood Security Watch. And, I think it's so important to think about all the logistics before HART starts to operate. Pearl Highlands is a mostly residential suburban area, so a lot of families. Families are going to be riding it. The community is going to be riding it. I know the city is concerned with the community impact, safety, and parking. If any of you are parents, you know how important it is to take your baby, or how important it is to take children with you everywhere, especially those who have children under 18. This discussion is so important about convenient access to rail, and especially for those residents who do not have train stations planned in their communities. And in this resolution, there is a plan to identify access points. The study will identify the most efficient and effective approaches to providing access to the train to serve the Wa'iawa community. And so therefore, we are in strong support. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions for the testifier? Okay, hearing none. Clerks, are there any other remote testifiers waiting to testify?
Mr. Chair, there are none.
Okay. Thank you. Members, we've heard from DTS and heard from HART on this. Is there any further discussion on this resolution? Member Tolba.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say mahalo for hearing this, and I'm glad to see that the department is supportive of the reso. And I just want to stress the concerns of community as well, and our neighborhood boards. You guys hear them, they're when this was pitched to them, they thought they would have a parking structure. So, any viable solution, for Central Oahu to connect to rail, I think is worthy and needed to discuss. So, and I also hear the concerns with Councilmember Okimoto, and it is a challenging place. But again, we're doing this on behalf of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other discussion? All right. Hearing none, the chair recommends that Resolution 23-42 be reported out for adoption. Any final discussion on this point? Any objections? Any reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Thank you. All right, we got one more resolution here, and then our info briefing. Item number 4 is Resolution 23-44. This approves an amendment to the City and County of Honolulu's list of Federal Transit Administration and Federal Highway Administration candidate projects in the federal fiscal years 2022 to 2025 Transportation Improvement Program. We have with us the Director of Department of Transportation Services, Roger Morton, to provide us with an overview of this resolution.
Aloha, Chair. This resolution is really a reflection, a good news resolution that we have been successful in attracting even more funds than we thought. And so we took a look, and we are essentially adding federal funds to our TIP program. And we're doing them largely in our electrification program, but we also have made changes in our Alopono Bridge program. We deleted our federal lands program, and we added additional funds for our bus and handy van acquisition program. It's a good news story, as from our perspective. We are trying to fast track some of these federal funds so that we can actually start breaking ground on many of the projects, and happy to answer questions that anybody might have.
Okay, members, any questions for the director at this time? Okay. Seeing none, we'll call now on in-person testifiers. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers on this measure, not anything else?
Mr. Chair, there are none.
Okay. There being no in-person testifiers, we'll proceed with the remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers?
Mr. Chair, there are none.
Okay, is there anyone else standing by remotely to testify? Okay, seeing none. Members, we're back in discussion on this. Is there any discussion on these items as they relate to the tip? Okay. There being none, the chair recommends that Resolution 23-44 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion, objections, or reservations on that recommendation? Hearing none. So ordered. Thank you. And now this brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is the discussion with the Department of Transportation Services regarding the status of rail critical path items and the integration of initial rail operations with bus routes. Joining us in the council chamber, we have Director Roger Morton from the Department of Transportation Services and his team to give brief presentations to the committee. For your information, the presentations are available online as Departmental Communications 222 and 225. We also have Lori Kahikina, Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation.
Chair, just a clarification, I'd like my deputy to cover this.
Very well.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, council members. For the record, Lori Kahikina, CEO and Executive Director of HART. We just have a few slides just to give an update on what is the critical items that needs to be completed before we hand the system over to DTS. Okay. Oh, no, Joe can do it. Thank you. Okay. So as I've been publicly talking about, the two main things that we need to cover before handing over to DTS is the trial running and hammerhead. So the trial running, we started back in August, and we had to do 144 test case scenarios. Hitachi needed to get them done, so that is complete. And about a month ago, we started the second phase of trial running, which is they have to have 98.5% availability, and I am so pleased to announce they hit that over the weekend. So we estimated between 45 to 60 days. They hit it within 35 days. So we're really proud of the Hitachi team, the HART team, DTS team. Thank you. This is a huge milestone for us. It's been long coming, long discussed over the years, and they made it ahead of what we anticipated. So there is still some paperwork that they need to complete, and they're hoping to get that handed over to HART by the end of April. The other item that I was talking about publicly was the hammerheads. And again, just a reminder, the hammerheads are those T-structures that are supporting the stations. So on the west side, there are 21 of these hammerheads that have cracks in them. The epoxy injections have been done on those hammerheads, but 8 of them need to have post tensioning done. So that material is being manufactured, and as my understanding, it's on the ship and to be here next week. Shortly after that, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks after that, we will start the construction on those hammerheads. The schedule for that is still slated to be completed at the end of May. Okay. So once all the hammerheads and the trial running documentation is done, we need to do the safety certification, which you folks have reviewed. That's part of it. But there's a safety certification that HART, DTS, HDOT, FTA all go through. Yes, Chair.
Sorry, give me 1 second. I just want to announce that pursuant to Council Rule 8D, Councilmember Tolba is now designated as a temporary voting member of the Committee on Transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the safety certification needs to be done by all of those entities, need to be signed off, and we are working collaboratively with all of those different stakeholders to get this done. So we are still slated, everything to be completed, hammerheads trial running by the end of May, and hand this over to DTS in June, and DTS is going to be talking about the actual opening. Chair, there's also one more thing I wanted to share. It's not part of the critical path items to get done, but over the weekend, we worked with HDOT Ed Sniffen to update the Google Maps. So if you folks now go on Google Maps, to get onto Dillingham and to get to the different businesses, it routes you the proper way, because right now there's only traffic, there's only one lane in each direction and no left turns. So it's a little frustrating if you're on Google Maps, I want to go to, let's say, Wet Okole, it takes me down Dillingham and turn left. But now Google Maps routes you the proper way so that you can only turn right. So that's some good news that just happened over the weekend. That's my presentation, Chair.
Members, any questions to Executive Director Kahikina? I do have one question. So just to repeat on this last slide, the materials for the hammerhead repairs are here on island. We don't have to wait for supply chain.
No, sorry, Chair. No, it is on a ship on Matson. It shipped last week, so it should be here next week.
Okay, good. So it's not just somewhere in California. It's on its way.
It was somewhere in the ocean.
Good. Members, any questions? Any other questions for Director? Okay, thank you. And we'll proceed now, I guess, to the second part of this, which is bus rail integration.
Let me just make sure.
Great, please proceed.
Aloha, Chair and Committee. John Nouchi, again, Deputy Director, DTS, here to talk about bus rail integration, probably one of the most exciting parts. We see HART speeding towards handing off this rail project. And, you know, we won't be able to call it a project for too much longer because it'll be in operation. So that speaks of its permanence and its longevity. I kind of feel like I'm in the baton passing right now, and I gotta speed up because Lori's like charging towards me, and I gotta grab this baton and run with it. Or DTS figuratively has to do that. Go to the next slide, please. And recognizing that this is not our first rail system, we have a rail heritage from ORNL, Oahu Rail and Land Company, which actually I don't want to say circumnavigated, but it did traverse Kaena Point, which is something we can't do right now. But just to the point that we are doing something that is part of our history, and we're reinvigorating something that we used to do. Go to the next. So today, I just want to give a baseline talk, just some very simple facts about what's going to happen when rail opens and how it relates to our bus system, how our bus system is going to evolve, and so a very basic timeline before and after opening. Go to the next. So very much factual. We're going to open not just 10 miles. We round it to 10, even though it should be 10.75 miles between East Kapolei, the Kualaka'i East Kapolei Station, and the Halava Aloha Stadium Station. We will be opening all 9 stations in the first 10.75 miles in our initial opening. We've already talked today about the train's operating hours, but I think one of the best things is that whenever rail is operating, there will be a train coming every 10 minutes. So we can rely on that regularity. We give everybody a good reason to get up off the street and go upstairs and take rail, which is kind of runs unfettered by any traffic or any other conditions that happen down on the roadway. We do have 5 points of interface. 5 rail stations do have bus transit centers attached to them, and that includes UH West Oahu, the West Lock Station, Waipahu Transit Center, the Pearl Highlands, and the Aloha Stadium Station. There are 3 park-in rides, also co-located with stations at the Keauna'i UH West Oahu Station, the Honolulu Ho'opili Station, and the Halava Aloha Stadium Station. And we also are linking at this time 2 University of Hawaii campuses at UH West Oahu and at Leeward Community College. So there you can see on the screen, there is the 10.75 mile alignment. And this is where it gets very exciting for me, who is very much a transportation and a transit nerd. We can go on. First of all, this is a point that I think most of our passengers, even our potential passengers out there, are very surprised about. One really, really exciting piece of news: when we open rail will be treated in our multimodal transit system just like any other bus route. There is no premium fare to ride rail. You can transfer freely from bus to rail just like you do now. Transfers are accommodated within 2.5 hours with your Holo card, all fare capping, all best value. It all applies with use of the Holo card. So I think first and foremost, we want to let everybody know that if you use your Holo card, we can treat rail just like any other bus route. Okay. I'm gonna start in the west side and move to the east. And Chair, for this committee, as we do have several months ahead moving towards rail, what we, DTS, would like to offer is that we can take a deeper dive into these bus rail connections at each of the stations. For now, we wanted to kind of provide an overview and show some maps as to how a lot of our service will be reestablished and realigned to service the available stations. So in the Kapolei neighborhood, most notably, we're introducing 2 new routes, the 46, which will travel between Kapolei Commons in the west and actually go through downtown Kapolei, through villages of Kapolei, past Kamakana-Ali'i, and actually service both the Kualaka'i East Kapolei station and end at the Keone'ai UH West Oahu station. That will also operate very frequently, matching the frequency of rail. So not only does the frequency of rail pertain to, riding the train itself, but we have frequent buses connecting to it on this west side. We also have a direct shot coming from the Makakilo hillside with the new route 461, as well as all the other existing services that do pass by the rail stations there. Heading eastward a little bit over, Waipahu is one of our greatest transit-dense cities and towns that we have. The 3 stations in this neighborhood will also get the benefit of that 10-minute rail service, but we have established since the year 2000 a plethora of community circulator services that will focus on that Waipahu Transit Center station, the station at West Lock. And I think it's really refreshing to see Leeward Community College, who has always traditionally been almost sequestered on one side of the H1 freeway, get a 10-minute transit service. That's going to be invaluable for those students there. We don't foresee much change in the Waipahu area just because there's a good density of transit services there that actually service the nodes that the stations are co-located with. But we look forward to welcoming our transit riders in Waipahu with all this bus service. And moving further east, looking at the Pearl City and Aiea district, we have what we've taken is the services that we provide in that neighborhood were established in the late 70s and the early 80s, recognizing that we had these bedroom communities that were developing out in Pearl City and in Aiea. And a lot of those transit trips only provided services during the AM rush hour and the PM rush hour because people were traditionally commuting from those bedroom communities to and from downtown Honolulu at the time. Now, multiple generations have passed during that time, and this is a good opportunity that we're bolstering up those services, recognizing some new services to some other ridgeline and valley areas, and providing them all-day service and also weekend service and holiday service, which a lot of these neighborhoods have not had before. So we're giving new access, and think about it, just to a lot of those ridges. So the Pearl City community, the Pearl City Peninsula, new service all the way up to Wailuna via Ka'ahumanu Street, Newtown, Royal Summit, Upper Pearl Ridge, even Ko'auka Loop, which has a very dense situation of condominiums, and also to Aiea and Halawa Heights. What's very interesting here is we have been coordinating with the Navy they have a lot of labor coming in and to build and construct new phases of their shipyard. Part of the challenge that the Navy has had is that there is no remaining parking available on base at the Naval Shipyard. And so they've been working really hard with DTS to try to find transit as an alternative, whether they have people park and ride at the park and rides that are available here, or even housing where they might be able to co-locate some military housing and get people on the rail to get to Pearl Harbor. So we can move to the next one. And in this map, so we see a little bit of a duplication with the Pearl City, Aiea, Halawa area. But most notably, the connection to Pearl Harbor and Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam will take place at the Halawa Aloha Stadium Station. We will be running a very frequent connection that will transport riders during the commute hours into Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam and serve as that primary connection that we're working with the Navy to get more workers in without having any increased parking demand at inside their gates. Most notably, just like how we had Route 46 connect to the end of rail on the west side, we have a revised Route A that's going to connect at the Halawa Aloha Stadium Station. And this bus will kind of complete the link past the Makalapa Pearl Harbor Station, but then hop on the freeway and go all the way to Chinatown, downtown, Kaka'ako, Ala Moana, and UH Manoa. And we're going to be operating that at a high frequency to match the rail also. We are also extending our limited stop rapid Route 1L, which actually travels all the way from Hawaii Kai. We're going to be extending that through Mapunapuna into the dense Salt Lake condominium corridor along Ala Ilima Street and extending that down Salt Lake Boulevard to terminate at the Halawa Aloha Stadium Station. So what that does is, although it would be a long trek from Hawaii Kai and East Honolulu or even Kaimuki, any of the areas that are current Route 1 services, you can get to Kapolei with one transfer now, back and forth. And I think that kind of mobility is something that we're trying to encourage. I'm not saying anybody would ride from Hawaii Kai to Kapolei, but it is possible where it is not possible now. So we're really trying to flex our bus system to make rail, to bring as many passengers as we can to rail and really start to bolster the value of our multimodal system. And that concludes our presentation on that.
Members, any questions? Vice Chair Cordero.
Thank you. Hi, Deputy Director Nochi. First off, I want to thank you and especially Director Morton for doing the presentation regarding the bus rail integration to the Aiea Neighborhood Board. Of course, with more information, and especially a timeline of when rail is going to be starting interim service. Of course, both Aiea Neighborhood Board and Aiea Community Association has been requesting for, like the Transportation Committee here is hearing it every month until we're opening. An update on the presentation with further routes, specific routes, namely the Aiea Community Association. And of course, I don't have to be specific as to which member is asking in both the ACA and Aiea Neighborhood Board. So if I could provide that, we do have an email for you, Deputy Director Nochi, if you can communicate with our office in setting that up. But it was a request to both myself and the city.
And yes, we really appreciate the for this committee and for the council to provide us the venue to do to show some of these upcoming changes. And that's not to say that we're not planning on doing further outreach at neighborhood board level. What we are producing right now is the multitude of public materials that we're going to use to communicate this. And we're actually looking at different methods, not just paper, not just electronic. We're looking at, social media videos. We're trying to kind of thread the needle and get a broad diversity of materials such that people will know about this. And again, this venue thank you to committee chair, is a good place for us to start doing that. And we welcome the opportunity to come back monthly and share more granular type information, especially as we're producing these and we have more to share.
Oh, okay, thank you. Is there an outreach plan or timeline that we can expect to see all this information being disseminated?
In terms of an outreach plan, I think what we'd like to do is get an idea of when. Short answer is yes, but we would like to have most of our materials put together, and then we can kind of formulate the best way to do that outreach based on how much time we have left. I mean, we have a diminishing amount of time, as I feel Lori's racing towards me right now. So I think we can, short answer is yes, and we can communicate that back to this committee and to your office if you wish.
Okay, thank you. And I think especially with less or no restrictions anymore out in our community, there's a great amount of opportunities, whether it be partnering with like particular malls or markets that are out there, whether it be at the I forgot what it was called, the Pro Country Club. There's a lot of people that go there that are in and around the area, but are from the different ranges from Mililani to even town that go there, and it's on a ridge, and so like just different opportunities and events that we could go to, that we could possibly help out at. And of course, once the information is ready, hopefully our office also can be we're able, ready, and willing to help disseminate all that information too.
Absolutely, and we thank you for that. Just for example, the shipyard is having a fair, and I think it's is it tomorrow, Roger? Thursday, which is, yeah. So it's happening on Thursday. So we're actually sending a team over, and it'll be a group effort between our rail, our bus, and our Hitachi partners to go and talk to the shipyard folk about, hey, rail's coming, and teach them how to use it and those kinds of things. So we're really looking at personalizing materials for each community, such that the most important things and routings and services pertinent to that community get highlighted and focused upon.
Oh, awesome. I'm going to tell my husband, since he's at the shipyard, to go check it out. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Member Solba.
Thanks, Chair. Deputy Director, Eva Beach. Every morning, I do morning radio because I have to work several jobs so that I can make it here in the islands. When you hear traffic, the first thing they say is traffic on Fort Weaver and Kolawaka. So I see the plan. What's the plan for Eva Beach and trying to bring relief, to the residents in my community?
So the plan for Eva Beach right now, it depends on where they're going. We have some pretty strong transit connections that go between Eva Beach Transit Center, and Kapolei. We also have some very frequent services that utilize Fort Weaver. Unfortunately, Fort Weaver as a pipe is quite constrained right now, and we do recognize that. So we do have multiple paths that Eva Beach residents could take to access rail. Probably a little bit more roundabout path would be a little bit quicker, is if they went into Kapolei and then hopped on a bus that took them to rail. We are looking at overcoming that gap between Roosevelt Avenue in Kalaeloa and Kapolei Parkway across Kamakana-Ali'i. That is something that we have not been able to creatively figure out how to join those two together. But with the frequent service on the new Route 46 that's going in, I think that gives us some opportunity to further restructure things and give more direct access to rail from Eva Beach, or from the Eva area in general.
Yeah. No, I think it's important, kind of like what Councilmember Cordero said. If you can, give us updates and so that I can present that at the Eva Beach Neighborhood Board. I think that'll be helpful, because I think it'll be important moving forward to giving them information, because it gets challenging in the morning out of Eva Beach. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I just want to return to something now that Councilmember Talba's mentioned the west side of the alignment. I want to clarify something that came up, which is Route A. It's being reconfigured. Right now, Route A goes all the way to Waipahu Transit Center. So under this, it's going to stop at Pearl Ridge and then hop on the viaduct. So there's going to be no stops along from the stadium until we get into the Vineyard exit?
That's correct.
Okay, and then the 1L, will there be stops in Salt Lake itself?
Yes.
Okay, so A will be just zooming along, but 1 will still go through and pick up people in Salt Lake.
Our idea is that the 1L should substitute through North King Street. And also, if you look at Salt Lake right now, we've always historically set up Salt Lake to be a residential community that's connected via freeway to downtown. But understanding we have this rail system right now, it's kind of helping fulfill that destiny of the locally preferred alternative, such that we have a bus coming through Ala Ilima Street, which is the densest residential corridor in Salt Lake, to poke out and hit. You can actually get to Kapolei from Salt Lake now, which you with rail, which you can't do right now.
Great, and then have we figured out where the A is going to stop when it gets off the freeway? Is it Liliha? Or
I don't know off the top of my head. I can find that out and then communicate that back to you.
Okay, I think that would be helpful for folks in town who maybe live, work out on that side, or even, at the shipyard or something.
I do believe, and I will confirm, but I do believe we have a stop at Liliha Street, Vineyard and Liliha.
Great. Member Tupola, any questions about bus rail integration? All right. Vice Chair Cordero.
Okay, thank you very much. My question is relating, since we were talking about either different parts of the community, we talked about residential, but as we get to actually parts of Aya and even near the airport, we do start to increase density and business mixes, and including Mapunapuna. And I do want to, where is it? Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. Okay, for Mapunapuna, and I know that there is a bus route currently that goes through it. Will that be changed any bit? Because I don't see it listed here on the Evolving the Bus Halaba slide.
If you're referring to the Route 32 that traverses Mapunapuna, we also have, this is a quiz for me, I should know. We have the 3 that also services Mapunapuna. We're not anticipating any changes to the buses servicing Mapunapuna right now. If anything, we are adding 1L service to Mapunapuna.
Okay, so, sorry, can you repeat that again, please?
Sure, we don't anticipate any changes to the existing routes through Mapunapuna. But we are adding service via the Route 1L to that corridor.
Okay, thank you. Maybe it was just hard for me to tell that. Okay, thank you. And so we have this and we have the different routes, but is there going to be a written plan that we can physically see and, of course, as a live document too, be able to review, provide feedback, and then continue to work on as the operations continues?
Yes, DTS is working on that, and it's part of the body of work that we need to do to communicate with the public. Some people do very well with written, narrative and maps. Some people really like the visual, some people like the video, and like I said earlier, we're really trying to figure out how to do what's most effective for our ridership base and, for anybody we're communicating with, including this council.
Thank you. And I know that the bus integration has been a topic at the IA Neighborhood Board for so many years. And of course, I want to be able to have them feel like that their comments, comments about once we get off the like a rail car, like how long are we going to be waiting? I know that we've addressed this a lot, but and maybe I'm just speaking up for that neighborhood board because I've been seeing that evolve through that discussion evolve. But are you able to pinpoint exactly like what has changed throughout the plan and throughout the bus rail integration plan through those discussions?
Let me see if I understand. I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. And this is mainly for the Aya Halaba area because there has been so many discussions, and of course they always bring up like, how long are we going to be waiting once we get off a rail car, and then and that is addressed here, but how are we able to share with board members and community members saying that, hey, your feedback has allowed for these changes in our updated or current bus rail integration plan?
I think we are currently working our way through the printed timetables and schedules, and that is really what directs where the rubber hits the road, so to say, with the bus system. We can actually look at that with the community. In a lot of these communities, we only provided peak hour services on weekdays. So I think for the majority of the Ridgeline communities between Pearl City and Halava, we end up having far more service that occurs all day, on weekends and holidays. So whenever we look at an improvement and an enrichment and an increase in service, we generally, we're increasing service along the established corridors already. So just as an example for that, we have a Route 74 that does a few trips in the morning and a few trips in the afternoon. We're breaking that into two pieces such that there's an individual route that goes to Aya Heights and an individual one that goes to Halava. And we're providing all-day service on that and the weekends and the holidays. So in that sense, I think we're providing more service, and hopefully the neighborhood feels regarded in that respect.
Thank you. And that's exactly what I want the neighbors to hear, that, we heard that DTS heard this and allowed for the plan to grow into this bus rail integration plan, but we are offering more service. And so I guess I just want DTS to be like, yeah, we listen, we're giving you more.
Okay, we can make that the tip of the spear here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Member Chipola.
Just really briefly, and please forgive me if you already covered this, is DTS or the HART going to be naming the rail, or are we just going to call it the rail until the end of time?
We are currently in the process of branding rail right now, working with the mayor's administration to introduce that branding at this point. And we will be doing that prior to opening.
Yeah, I saw your presentation. It was like nothing but the facts. I was like, ooh, there's some branding in here. So what direction are we going with the naming of this? Because, it's kind of a big deal for me. It opens up in my district, and I want this to be like legit looking everything. So if there is, any like nuances, I think we would love to know so that we can also jump on board. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yep.
Thank you. Councilmember Tolba.
Deputy Director, have you guys already done trials to see like the time? It's kind of the same question with Councilmember Cordero, but like, if you guys got on rail, got off the rail, went on the bus, got off the bus, did you guys? So maybe that would help give people better visualization on what would feel like, in the morning.
We have
or in the
done
afternoon.
that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Sorry.
We absolutely have done that. What we did was we took a group of differently abled people, and what we ended up doing was testing a walk time and a walk distance. We measured walk distances from the upstairs platform using either the elevators or the stairway or the escalators. And what we did was we came up with a mean travel time that was representative of people of different abilities. And did schedule the buses that connect to rail to operate kind of the same way. And in that sense, where we could, we tried to make the buses, especially the ones that don't arrive as often, arrive in an ample amount of time to a rail station, such that they could discharge the passengers and the people would have enough time to make their transfers and get up to the train. In that case, I think we're less worried about bus to rail because the rail operates every 10 minutes.
Right.
Whereas if there's something that operates less frequently, we'd be more worried about them making their connections. So we're in the process, and that's why I think we're taking a little bit more time to optimize our schedules and create what we call in our scheduling system a meet, such that if something is very frequent to very frequent, we are trying to offset it such that, you know, we can get the majority of passengers off of rail and then onto a bus, or vice versa, off of a bus and onto rail, in such fashion that they experience the least delay. That's been our goal, but that will be part of us actively analyzing the service once it goes in and being able to tweak that to make that better work for the passengers.
Last question, you know, the park and rides like at Ho'opili, secured, how does that gonna work for like residents? Say myself, if I wanted to park my car at Ho'opili, that park and ride, get on rail, will there be a charge?
There will not be a charge for parking at this time.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. For members, for your knowledge, as well as for the public who may be watching, at the May, June, and July Transportation Committee meetings, we're going to be continuing this series of information briefings in preparation for the opening of rail and beyond, just to make sure that we're asking all the right questions and have all of the information provided to us, then we can in turn make sure it's provided to the public. So before we close out, I do want to proceed with in-person testimony on this information briefing. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers on this informational briefing?
Mr. Chair, there are none.
Okay, seeing none, we'll now proceed to remote testimony. Is there anyone who would like to testify remotely? I see Angela Melody Young. Please proceed.
Aloha, Angela Melody Young, testifying on behalf of Kapalama NSW in support of the discussion and the integration plan. I'm glad I'm going to get upgraded for the Holo card, and also glad to hear that some of the work is in coordination with the Navy, and that the cracks are being addressed, and that it will be a collaborative process with all the engineers, from Engineer of Record, DTS, Department of Trans, FTA, PMOC, and their respective structural engineers. Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to hear more about the cracks, but I think that's going to be in the next phase, because I've been calling HART to get more information about it. I'm like, I need to know the plan for the cracks before HART goes into operation. But yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions for the testifier? Hearing none, is there anyone else wishing to testify remotely? Okay, hearing none, and there being no further business before us in this committee, the Committee on Transportation is adjourned. It's 4:17. Thank you.